2, 1. Back once again, the patriotic babe, the CIA veteran, Miss Clare Lopez, today, Thursday, February 24th, 2022, at 1:26 p.m. Eastern Time. Obviously, Russia starting their quote-unquote special military operations in Ukraine last night. I was playing some video games online with some friends of the podcast, and we were actually watching it stream. And as it started, some guys were like, I'm going to go get like some beer. Other guys were like, I'm going to go have a cup of coffee. I want to stay up and watch it. I want to see what's going on. And I think you'd appreciate this. I said, it was like 11 o'clock. I was like, I'm gonna go get a Red Bull. I was like, I'm gonna stay up and watch with you too. And the resounding response was, go to bed. Thursdays you have Clare Lopez. You can't miss this episode. And
no kidding.
Swear to God, there's video evidence of it. I can send you the video. I'm not kissing your ass. And so I was like, they don't even have my back. They were like, you have Clare. There's one guy who's in Wales, and he was like, you have Clare Lopez tomorrow. You're gonna go talk to her. And I was like, fuck. So I couldn't.
That is funny.
So they like my podcast, but they like you more than they like me. But because I've only got you for 33 minutes, I'm going to shut my stupid mouth. Clare, Miss Lopez, what is going on right now?
Well, what is going on right now is what was long anticipated. And that is Vladimir Putin trying to reestablish as much of the Russian Empire as he can possibly get away with. We thought perhaps he would only want to take the eastern region of Ukraine that borders Russia, called the Donbass. There are 2 oblasts there. An oblast is something like a state or a province. One is called Donetsk and the other is Luhansk. And in each one of those is a smaller region that Putin recognized 2 days ago in that speech that was broadcast, recognized as independent people's republics of whatever. Absolutely no legitimacy internationally, United Nations or anything else, but so he did. And the thought was that, he wanted to incorporate not just the 2 people's republics, but the larger oblasts as well, where Ukraine, the government of Ukraine, still maintained control and positioned troops. But once the invasion began last night, it became clear that it was not only the Donbass, the attack, of course, coming from 3 different directions, from the north, from Belarus, all across the eastern border there with Russia, and then from the south, from Crimea, which he had taken back to Mother Russia. It had always been part of Russia, but he took it back in 2014 when the Ukrainian people ousted Yanukovych, the president who was so pro-Moscow, and sent him packing off to Russia. So that attack began. It has included, rocket and missile fire, but at more places than perhaps we had thought, at cities throughout Ukraine, but especially at the capital, Kiev. Now, what it seems is that Russia intends to knock out all the military bases and the sites of command and control, and very likely wants to topple the government, decapitate the government of Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine in Kiev, and replace him with a pro-Moscow puppet, which they had with Yanukovych before he got kicked out 8 years ago. And he wants to sort of reset that scene, that reality for Ukraine and Russia. Broader picture, Putin believes that the worst catastrophe of his entire life was the breakup of the Soviet Union back in 1991 when he was a KGB officer. And this has been eating away at him his entire career life since then. He's getting on up there in years now. Well, aren't we all? But he sees a closing window, I think, of opportunity now that there is another pile of limp spaghetti sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I think that was the real impetus. It was 2014 when he moved to take Crimea. That wasn't, by the way, so much of an invasion as it was an Anschluss, because Crimea wanted to be with Russia, okay, and probably the separatist regions of the Donbass do too. But nevertheless, these are sovereign territory areas of Ukraine. He has wanted to reestablish the power and the glory of Russia, even though diplomatically, economically, politically, militarily, Russia just doesn't have it anymore, but they want to pretend that they do. They want to show that they do in some way. The economy of Russia, by the way, is smaller than that of the state of Texas, which as one of 50 states is a powerhouse. But this is, what one American politician, I forget which one, once called a gas station with nukes.
Yeah.
Russia.
Yeah.
A gas station with nukes. So all of these areas that I mentioned, diplomatically and economically and militarily and politically, Putin is not all that strong. Yeah, militarily, if you count the nukes and you count numbers, just sheer numbers of army, military troops, okay, yeah. But I'll tell you what, I've been listening to retired General Jack Keane, who heads up the Institute for the Study of War. Very good resource. I would recommend it for people who want to follow this. They're putting out bulletins every day, short 2-3 page bulletins. Institute for the Study of War, and his name is General Jack Keane.
Got it.
He's often one of the analyst guests on Fox News that comes on pretty often these last days, several times a day. Anyway, I think his and the Institute's perspective is very reasoned, very astute. They did change their minds about some things along the way. They did not expect a full-on invasion of all of Ukraine, and probably still don't. And the reason for that goes back to those 4 areas of Russia that I don't think, and he doesn't think, they don't think are all that solid, all that strong. Again, diplomacy is out the window now because he just wrecked that. That's down the tubes. The economy, not that strong. What does Russia produce? It's an extractive industry country, oil and natural gas, plus they have some minerals. And other than that, what do they have to offer? They sell weapons. Yeah. That's kind of it. Well, I should add one more area. Demographically, Russia's population is in a death spiral. I mean, literally, about 1.6 or so children per woman per lifetime, when, as we know, replacement level is 2.1 children per woman per lifetime. They're at 1.6 or so, somewhere around there. So weak economically, weak demographically, weak militarily, if you don't count the nukes. I mean, the nukes count. Yeah. No mistake, the nukes count. But popularity has been pretty good for Putin these years, but the body bags start coming home by the tens of thousands because the Ukrainians are going to fight. Yeah. They may lose military bases and command and control centers, but every man and boy from the age of 15 to 60 is going to be armed, and in particular, the parliament of Ukraine passed an emergency measure, I think it was yesterday, to permit, to encourage everyone who's able to pick up a gun, which the government will provide them, and to be ready to fight for their country, and they will. They're close, Ukraine and Russia, culturally, linguistically, not the same though, not the same. And Ukraine likes being independent and sovereign since 1991. And it intends to keep that one way or another. So whether Putin will continue to try to, occupy and subjugate the entire country, General Keane thinks not. They've overreached, he thinks, that they've tried to grab too much. they can't. I mean, there would be an insurgency, a domestic, opposition, guerrilla warfare that would make Afghanistan look like a picnic.
Yeah.
That's what Ukraine would become for years if he tried to subjugate the entire thing. But if he just tries to decapitate the government and replace that with a puppet, that may be what Putin's trying to do right now. Just really quick in response, Putin has shown up the fissures, the splits within NATO. Germany comes to mind. But kind of paradoxically, at the same time, as this goes on and as this invasion continues, it may be that Putin has served as actually what he's done is to stiffen NATO's spine a bit.
Yeah.
And bring them together. Not that we, the United States, or NATO has any treaty obligation whatsoever to come to Ukraine's defense, but this is a brazen, violation of international law any way you look at it. And even though there's no treaty obligation and Ukraine is not a member of NATO, it is a partner of NATO, kind of like an intermediate step. Help is flowing in way of weapons and other supplies. Whether that's enough to hold off, the Russian juggernaut, maybe not, but it will give them something to fight with, and that's the point. So there's that. The other thing is the sanctions. Both the United States and European countries have immediately imposed sanctions, which many said should have come a long time ago. But yesterday imposed sanctions on Russian banks, on certain members of the oligarchy, if you will, of the Russian leadership around Putin. For some reason, not on Putin himself. I don't get that. And gotten Germany to say, oh, the Nord Stream pipeline, the gas pipeline that runs between Russia and northern Germany, is going to be put on hold. Well, it's already on hold. Newsflash. It's completed, it's built under the Baltic Sea, but it was not open yet. The natural gas was not flowing yet, and due to regulatory bureaucratic things, was not due to open up until later this year. So Germany just put a pause on a pipeline that was already paused. So, okay, whatever. And I'll make one more comment before tossing it back to you, Tommy, and that is, in terms of the world, at the United Nations Security Council, of course, Russia is a member, so's China, but from places all over the world, condemnation is pouring in. Absolutely not one single country in the entire world that I've seen so far has supported Moscow, has supported Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and that includes China. If I can read to you really quickly,
take your time.
A statement from an article that I just read this morning
at Clare podcast. This is the Clare podcast. Take it. The Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, Cliff May's outfit in Washington, D.C. here. Actually, this is dated yesterday, but what it says is, over the weekend, the quote, over the weekend, Beijing distanced itself from Russian aggression against Ukraine, calling for the quote, sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all countries to be respected and safeguarded. That came out of Beijing. So for those who are concerned about a, Sino-Russian entente or, partnership at the moment, valid concerns. But I think this is pretty significant coming out of Beijing, this kind of a statement. So long story short, no nation on earth has supported Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and to the contrary, have all of them have condemned it. That's also China. That's China being China. That's China saying COVID's not transmissible between humans. COVID is okay.
No, but this is a very serious official statement out of Beijing.
Okay.
And they are not standing by Putin. That's significant.
do you think, again, from my 31-year-old biology degree, not an expert at any of this, not even an amateur, is that to preemptively kind of put, because I mean, what's the most trending thing on Twitter? It was Taiwan, not Ukraine. It was Taiwan. It's everyone's watching Taiwan.
Yeah.
Is that a preemptive? We don't want every nation, is that what it is? And is that a play on words because they don't recognize Taiwan as a nation?
Well, it is indeed. Taiwan for the Chinese Communist Party is a breakaway province. Now that cannot really be said of Ukraine or these places in Ukraine. They are part of Ukrainian sovereign territory, even though they are populated mostly, I think majority, by Russian speakers, ethnic Russians, that is true. And those two so-called people's republics are separatist, want to break away from Ukraine, want to be connected to Russia. Nevertheless, the last time they were part of Russia was during the Soviet Union, during the time of the USSR. And Ukraine was one of the Soviet socialist republics. But it's not quite the same thing as China's claim to Taiwan for many centuries, that it was a province of China. And therefore it's wayward and it needs to be brought back into the fold. So yeah, that language is carefully chosen, but it's very significant in the import of it that China is not standing by Russia.
Yeah, no, I mean that is, yeah, that is important. Putin's Putin's statement about those who try to halt or intervene in the invasion will be met with force the likes of which they've never seen before. That bluster, or is that a man?
No, that's real, and that's
it's an
that's
aging
aimed
man.
directly, yeah, at the United States, at NATO. Areas where Russia has some very serious capability include cyber warfare.
Mhm.
There have been cyber attacks, of course, launched against Ukraine. But we'll recall back here in the United States, I think it was last year or maybe 2020, I forget which year, but recently, that what was believed or, assessed to be Russia, shut down one of our pipelines. Remember this? A pipeline that runs from Texas on up the East Coast, northward along sort of the US East Coast. The other capability besides nukes alone that Russia has is an EMP capability, electromagnetic pulse capability. So does China, so does North Korea, Iran probably soon. But that is another possibility, which, because we are not protected, because the United States electric grid is not secured, excuse me, not secured, not protected, and that's a very serious, unspoken, but a threat. And by the way, all of our adversaries, the above so named, they've hardened their grids, but we haven't.
Well, that's so. Do you think that threat is, I mean, nuclear? It's because there hasn't been a tactical nuke since August 9th, 1945. I think it was Eric Schlosser said in Command and Control, his book about kind of nuclear weapons incidents. He said it's we often think of that we're no longer living under the bomb like we were during the Cold War, but he was like, they're all still there. They all still work, and it
Well,
can.
and Russia's armaments in terms of nuclear capability, including tactical nukes, has far surpassed our own.
Yeah.
And they've modernized their nuclear force. We have not modernized ours. Not to mention China and what China shares with North Korea.
Right.
They're all modernized and we're not.
Right.
And as well, Russia and China are already in the business of militarizing space.
Mhm.
Now, I hope and I expect that that's what President Trump's Space Command, at least in part, was intended to do, to defend us in space.
Yeah.
But,
The
who
the
knows where it is right now with the current occupant of the White House.
yeah. What the point I was trying to make wasn't necessarily modernization, which I know is important. They have to work, but I mean, even if it was just the concept of using nuclear weapons at all, as the author Eric Schlosser says, is we kind of downplay it as 1991. We're not living there anymore. It's still there. And so although it's, yeah, they've got like gas station with nukes, it's like, it's still nukes. And we've been desensitized for so long to it, but they're still there. Do you think that that is an aging man who for 31 years has been dwelling on the worst thing of his life, the collapse of the Soviet Union, who sees a closing window? Do you think that's an actual threat of?
Well, I
nuclear
think
weapons?
if NATO were to be foolish, which they're not at the moment, and try to intervene in Ukraine, that tactical nukes would certainly be a possibility there.
Yeah.
But now NATO is not going to intervene in Ukraine, aside from, sending weapons and equipment and other kinds of supplies. But that's what Putin was getting at.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that? Because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter, which again are just dipshits like me, excuse my French, saying this, for good, for evil to prevail, all that needs to happen is for good men to do nothing. Sure, that's great. And then there's people saying, the US, this is why we have this budget. How come we're not stepping in? We just got out of the Middle East in a terrible way. I'm looking at this more as is it I'm throwing my words together. A lot of people are saying we need to have a strong force to go in there, and it's interesting because you're no anti-American. You're as patriotic as they come, and you're the first, I would say, more conservative person I've heard in the last 24 hours say NATO would be foolish to intervene. Everyone else
Well, here's
saying,
why.
okay,
Because NATO is completely overmatched, for one thing.
okay,
I mean, the bottom line is that Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and we have no treaty obligation to defend it. And if even you want to go back to the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which was an agreement among the United States, Britain, Russia, and Ukraine, which came together in Budapest in that year. Bill Clinton was president of the United States in 1994, and came up with this agreement, this memorandum, that said we recognize the sovereign integrity and the right of countries to their sovereign territory. Essentially, that's what the memorandum said. It was not a defense pact. It was not a defense agreement. It was a memorandum among the four of us, to say that we mutually agree that sovereign borders, sovereign territorial integrity is something, a principle that we adhere to, that we agree to. And that's it. That's what the memorandum said. It did not say anything else.
yeah,
And then if you fast forward to 2014 and 15, there are the Minsk agreements. Again, these signed in Minsk, capital of Belarus. Parties to that again were US, UK, I think France, obviously Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. I think I've got the participants there. But the agreement there, among all of those, was to address the hostilities going on at that time, even in the breakaway regions of the Donbass. And the agreements reached included the fact that the Ukrainian government would permit and allow to go forward free, fair, unhindered elections in the Donbass by those regions of Donetsk and Luhansk to choose their own leadership, not to secede, but to have elections and choose their leadership without any interference from Kiev. That the lines of borders would be respected, and a number of other things, including agreements about the non-positioning of troops and weaponry in places like the breakaway regions of the Donbass, those kinds of things. However, unfortunately, the agreements were never fulfilled. They're practically, as far as I can tell, none of the provisions was ever implemented. There were disagreements about which one should come first, and all of that sort of things, and they were just never fulfilled. So these are the official agreements, NATO treaty, Budapest memorandum, and the Minsk agreements that come to bear on the situation. But all that said, NATO does not have a treaty obligation to interfere, to come to Ukraine's defense, and neither does the United States as a member of NATO. But further, I would say this: since the 1990s and the breakup of the USSR, NATO has really expanded very aggressively towards the east, and included in membership a number of countries that formerly were part of the Warsaw Pact. And Putin, for quite some time, was objecting that Ukraine must never become a member of NATO, because along with that would come, the possibility, the country agreeing to it, of course, that weaponry, troops, and indeed missiles and nuclear weapons could be positioned on that territory. And were that to have ever happened, nukes would be 5 minutes flying distance from Moscow.
Mhm.
And we'll remember that JFK, our President Kennedy, went to the brink of nuclear war back in 1962
That close
with the Soviet Union because of nukes positioned on Cuba.
Yeah.
So those concerns were never really addressed. They were brushed aside. I think that was a mistake. I think it could have been worked out to where, NATO and the US would never agree to say, well, we're just going to say that Ukraine and any other country can never, ever be a member of NATO. They're not going to do that. But what they could have done, and I think should have done, is at least behind the scenes, quietly, said something to the effect of, well, Ukraine does not now, and probably not in our lifetime, will ever meet the criteria to be a member of NATO, principally in two areas. One, Ukraine does not control the entirety of its own territory. And number two, Ukraine does not even remotely meet the standards of NATO for rule of law. The corruption is, well, endemic and huge. So they could have said, well, they're just not going to meet those requirements, and it's just not going to happen in our lifetimes. We're not going to say never. We're not going to pledge that you get a veto over whom we may invite or accept.
Yeah.
But it's just not going to happen. That might have gone a long way. The other thing I'll say is that I think that the West, NATO, US, Europe, that we've made a big mistake in certainly during the Trump administration, in turning Russia and Putin into the boogeyman. Yes, they're an adversary. They're a serious adversary. They're aggressive. They're hostile. They're belligerent. Putin himself is a thug. Okay, that's all true. But historically, and for hundreds of years, the culture, the religion of Ukraine has been westward looking. Back to Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, has been westward looking. Russia is far more a Western entity than it is an Eastern one.
Yeah. And
what we've done, I think, certainly during the Trump administration with Russiagate and the Russia hoax and all of that nonsense was all fake and made up, was to alienate any possibility that Trump would have had to find not an alliance, not a partnership even, but an MO, a modus operandi for managing the relationship with Russia. Trump would have done that.
Yeah.
And then Russia and Putin would not have gone off to seek an entente, or whatever you want to call it, with Beijing, which is where they are now. Where China is really a greater threat to both Russia and to the United States and other countries in the East Asia area too. you know, a bigger threat than Russia would ever be. But we've pushed, you know, Putin off into the willing arms of Xi Jinping. Nevertheless, you know, the statement I just read to you a bit earlier, that you know, Beijing is not gushing its support for what Putin has done.
Let's also
I think China, just real quick,
sure.
I think that China eventually probably wants to gobble up Siberia with its massive resources of oil and gas and minerals. And given the demographic trends in Russia, they just aren't going to be able to hold on to Siberia. China's demographics are in a death spiral too, but it's going to take more decades. It's going to take a longer time for that population to dwindle, and it will by the end of this century. But Russia's first.
Yeah, I was going to say your thesis on timber in Siberia, right? We talked about.
My master's thesis was on the overall natural resources of Siberia. Its economic potential.
Yeah, we talked about that last year. What I was going to say is, and I got you for 3 minutes. Is you know, it's, and I know I quote him all the time. I either quote like a respectable author, or I quote Tim Dillon, a fat gay comedian who I firmly believe is the funniest person to have ever walked this earth. But he actually had a great point about, he has a lot of good points, but he had a great point about Putin like last year, I think. And it was he compares it to, he was like, you know, he's like, he didn't come out of the closet until he was like 23, Tim Dillon. And he was like, you have to understand, he was like, I certainly don't sanction, you know, like more obscure lifestyles, but he was like, you have to look at like the 50s, 60s, 70s and like the homosexual community. And this is his take on it, is when you kind of bar them from like polite society or from like social norms, and you treat them like weirdos and you push them underground, he was like, don't be surprised when they start acting like weirdos and go underground, like any black market, right? But seriously, and that's, and he's a pretty conservative guy, but he said that about Putin. He was like, if we call them the boogeyman, if we do, and he's like, and there is legitimate reason to say that, don't be surprised when, if I'm the enemy, and I feel bullied, well, then what face am I saving anyway? I'll be the enemy. You know, I got kicked off YouTube. So yeah, I'm just going to keep interviewing Dr. Malone. Like I probably wouldn't have, but now I'm going to keep doing it. And that's not to, I know that's a very easy, simplified analogy of what's going on, but I think it's somewhat of what you're saying is, make them the enemy. Don't be surprised when they act like the enemy. And then the only Sun Tzu, right? Build a golden bridge for your enemies to retreat across. Well, you're building a golden bridge to Beijing. And although they publicly just said that they're not condoning this, back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had a public face, and then we had the back channels to get the missiles out of Turkey. So who knows what's going on in some back channel RFK equivalent between Beijing and Moscow. But that's just kind of my thoughts on what you were saying, is push him into the corner, make him the boogeyman. You're going to be the boogeyman. It's just, I
mean, his ambitions are still his ambitions.
Sure.
And to reestablish, you know, as much of a sphere of influence around, you know, greater Russia as he possibly can, reconstitute the Soviet Union to the extent that he can. That's all still there. Yeah. And we have to understand that that's still there. That's his mentality. That's his Weltanschauung, his worldview. Yeah. But I think it could have been dealt with differently than we did.
Sure. And I know
always also, you know, when the world, be it our friends, allies, and partners, or adversaries and enemies, perceive this level of abject weakness being projected out of the White House. Yeah. That's provocative. That is an open invitation to every rogue on earth. Hey, now's the chance. Let's get what we want while we still can before the window closes and, you know, the Republicans sweep the midterms.
It's the substitute teacher who shows weakness, doesn't know the rules. Everyone takes their phones out, starts texting. Oh, yeah, no, we always do this. Professor always lets us do this. And as a fifth grader, you could smell blood in the water. You go, oh, Oh, this isn't so and so. This is Miss Smith. We can do whatever. Oh yeah, no, we always play video games.
But this is what's so dangerously destabilizing about weakness,
Yes.
or at least the perception of weakness. And when we've got our senior military, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and so on and so on, spending their time talking about climate change and white privilege and systemic racism.
We get what we just
that does not project an image of strength. I just have to say, this is just simply not going to gain the respect, not admiration, not liking, but respect of the rest of the world. And while President Trump was in there for those 4 years, these rogues of the world kind of, they behaved to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But before that, during the Obama administrations and after Trump, now 1 year. I mean, we got 3 years to go.
I mean, one year.
It's hugely destabilizing when they perceive that kind of weakness.
Yeah, and it's and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a warring, a belligerent nation, but I mean, it's like JFK, a very measured guy. But it's like he said, you don't want LeMay choosing whether or not you go into war, but if you do go to war, he was like, you want LeMay.
It has to be credible, that strength and that threat. And I'll add something else. There have been 2 presidents in my lifetime anyway, who have been characterized or even caricaturized as cowboys, right? So the first was Ronald Reagan. You never know what he's going to do. He's crazy. He could just go off at any time. And then, of course, Trump. But that uncertainty about what are they going to do?
Madman theory.
I do that. What's their response going to be? Are they going to clobber me? Putting that doubt about the response into the heads of our adversaries is a good thing.
Yeah.
Being unpredictable and a little bit of a cowboy is a good thing when you're talking about our adversaries. And I'm sorry, but this administration, just not really so much.
Don't forget about that hyper classified, I think it was called furtherance under Kissinger, had its own classification level where he and some top CIA guys were going to start leaking unencrypted chats to the Soviet Union of them all discussing how crazy Nixon was. And they're like, man, if we can't win Vietnam conventionally, Nixon might start using thermonuclear weapons, hoping that the image of a madman. But the point is Nixon,
doubt.
Inserting
doubt into their minds. Yeah.
They wanted to foment a madman. And instead it's better to get a madman.
The question about rationality is a very serious part of policy, foreign policy.
Well, those are also the most fun friends to go out drinking with. You don't actually know if he's going to do the thing.
And then there was Reagan, who I don't know if it was a hot mic or just meant to be heard, comment about what was it? Something after a talk or a press conference or something. Bombing begins in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's the kind of thing. Does he really mean it? Would he really? Could he?
Yeah.
You want that doubt in the minds of the enemies. You want that.
Yeah.
The pile of pudding at 1600, Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah.
Not really.
You want a Trump saying on the campaign trail, what's the point of having nukes if we're not going to use them? You want to throw it out there.
Well, really and truly, even to the point of, instigating doubt about rationality.
Yeah.
Is a tactic that has its uses.
It does. I've kept you 5 minutes longer than I said I would.
Okay.
I want to keep you for 60 more seconds if I can.
Go ahead.
Can you make, or as long, I've got the whole afternoon for you. I know you're busy.
No, I got it.
And I know. I'll figure. Thursday, February 24th, 2:06 p.m. Eastern time, 2022. What are your predictions, your immediate, long, whatever they are? Do you have any quick predictions on what will happen, just so we can look back on and either pat ourselves on the back or laugh at this episode?
Well, that's easy. I don't know.
Like a
Um,
politician, Clare Lopez dodging the question.
No, I mean, I really don't know how far he'll go now, Putin, that is.
Yeah.
Certainly the Donbass. Perhaps, I think it's perhaps likely that he will try to decapitate the government of Kiev and install a puppet. That's as far as I can say. I don't think that he wants to get himself bogged down in the entirety of this humongous country. I think what, the third largest in Europe or something. I don't think he wants to get bogged down in all of that, but decapitate the government of Volodymyr Zelensky, install a puppet that will not object to the takeover of the Donbass.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we will revisit this next Thursday. And again, yeah, none of the guys I was gaming with would let me stay up. You gotta go to bed. You have Claire tomorrow. I was like, you motherfucker, you backstabbing motherfuckers. Nobody
Oh,
else. So, well, they've got your
my
back.
best to the guys.
Yes. Well, I will send that to them. They will cheer on. They all wanted to know I'm not even kidding. They wanted, when I texted you last night and was like, we're talking about this, they were trying to get me to get you on and do a podcast. Then I was like, guys, it's midnight. I'm not doing this right now. But
Wow.
yeah, they wanted a live
Wow.
podcast with you. But Claire Lopez, I will let
Okay.
you go. All your writings, your websites, your social media, all the videos, all the blah, 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 all that good stuff will be in the description. We will resume next Thursday, and hopefully nothing eventful happens. And yeah, hopefully because the real people that are getting screwed are the civilians in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
none of this is good.
Unfortunately.
God bless America. God bless the world. God bless Ukraine. Everybody, please act rationally, act safely. Claire Lopez, thank you so much.